I'm Leah Johnson, 47 years old, and I spent 15 years building innovative marketing campaigns that transformed how luxury hotels connect with travelers, only to watch my former boss steal every single concept and launch his own agency with my stolen work as his foundation. But what he did when I tried to expose the truth was even worse. If you've ever poured your creative soul into a project only to see someone else take credit, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this kind of professional theft. My career in hospitality marketing began almost by accident in a cramped Chicago office above a Thai restaurant in 2009. The smell of lemongrass and chili oil would drift up through the floorboards every morning as I climbed the narrow stairs to what Meridian Creative called their headquarters. It was really just 4 desks, an ancient coffee maker, and dreams bigger than our budget. I was 32, recently laid off from a corporate job that sucked my soul dry, and desperate enough to take a 40% pay cut for the chance to do something that mattered. My first mentor was Linda Vasquez, a fierce Puerto Rican woman who'd built Meridian from nothing after the big agencies told her she was too ethnic for luxury hospitality accounts. She taught me that marketing wasn't about selling rooms. It was about selling dreams, experiences, moments that people would treasure forever. Leah, she'd say, adjusting her signature red-rimmed glasses while reviewing my mock-ups, anyone can show a pretty bed and breakfast menu. You need to show them waking up to the sound of waves in Santorini or sipping wine while northern lights dance overhead in Iceland. Make them feel the experience before they book it. Under Linda's guidance, I learned to craft campaigns that didn't just showcase amenities, they transported potential guests into the stories they wanted to live. My first breakthrough came with a boutique hotel chain called Harbor Lights. Instead of typical room photos, I convinced them to let me create a day in your future campaigns. We filmed real couples experiencing surprise proposals at sunset, families building sandcastles while parents actually relaxed for once, solo travelers finding courage to try new adventures. The bookings increased 340% in 6 months. Industry publications started calling it emotional destination marketing, and suddenly agencies 3 times our size were trying to poach me. But I stayed loyal to Linda and Meridian. By 2015, I was creative director, and we'd landed accounts with 4 major luxury hotel chains and 12 boutique properties across the Midwest. My specialty became micro-moment marketing, capturing those tiny perfect instances that happen during travel and making them feel achievable for regular people with regular budgets. The campaign I created for Lakeshore Luxury Resorts, featuring weekend parent escapes, won 3 industry awards, and was featured in Hospitality Today as marketing that actually understands modern life. I remember the exact moment I knew I'd found my calling. It was 2016, and we were presenting to Stone Harbor Resorts, a family-owned company with properties in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. The CEO, Maria Stone, had built her business from a single lakeside lodge her grandmother left her. She wanted to expand, but didn't want to lose the authentic, homey feeling that made her places special. Traditional luxury marketing made her properties look cold and intimidating. I spent weeks at her properties, talking to families who returned year after year, watching how kids built forts with couch cushions, while parents finally had adult conversations by the fireplace, seeing how couples rediscovered each other without work emails and school schedules dictating every moment. The campaign I developed was called Come Home to Yourself, and instead of showcasing marble bathrooms and infinity pools, we showed real families being genuinely present with each other. Parents laughing during board games instead of checking phones, teenagers actually talking instead of texting, grandparents teaching kids to fish without anyone looking bored. The results were extraordinary. Stone Harbor's bookings increased 280% year over year, and more importantly, their guest satisfaction scores reached the highest levels in company history. The campaign won the Midwest Hospitality Marketing Excellence Award, and I was invited to speak at the National Hotel Marketing Conference in Las Vegas. Standing on that stage, talking to 800 industry professionals about authentic marketing in an age of artificial everything, I felt like I'd found my purpose. Those were golden years for me professionally. Linda promoted me to Senior Creative Director in 2017, and by 2018, I was essentially running all creative strategy for our growing client base. We moved to a beautiful office in River North, with exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a conference room that actually fit our whole team. I hired and trained 6 junior creatives, each specializing in different aspects of hospitality marketing. My personal specialty evolved into what industry publications started calling authentic luxury, showing how upscale experiences could feel approachable and real rather than intimidating and pretentious. The work was demanding but fulfilling. 16-hour days during campaign launches, weekend site visits to understand properties before pitching, late-night brainstorming sessions fueled by pizza and creative energy. But when a campaign launched and the client's bookings exploded, when guests posted reviews about how a weekend at one of our client properties changed their relationship with their family, when other marketers asked to study our strategies, those moments made every sacrifice worth it. My team respected my leadership style because I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. I remembered being the overwhelmed newcomer, so I made sure everyone had clear mentorship and growth paths. When Jake, my youngest designer, came up with a brilliant concept for showcasing hotel sustainability efforts through guest impact stories, I made sure his name was on the presentation and he got to pitch directly to the client. When Emma struggled with writer's block on a particularly challenging boutique hotel account, I sat with her for 3 hours until we cracked the perfect tagline, where stories begin and ordinary ends. By early 2019, Meridian Creative was being mentioned in trade publications alongside agencies 5 times our size. We'd been featured in Advertising Age, Hospitality Marketing Today, and Travel Industry Weekly. My personal LinkedIn profile had grown to 12,000 followers, mostly industry professionals who appreciated my insights about authentic marketing in an increasingly artificial world. Speaking requests came monthly, and I was developing ideas for a book about emotional marketing in the hospitality industry. But success in a small agency also meant vulnerability, and I started noticing subtle changes in the office dynamic that spring. Linda mentioned during our quarterly review that we were getting inquiries from larger agencies about potential partnerships or acquisitions. She seemed excited about the possibilities for growth, but I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. We'd built something special, personal, creative, values-driven. The thought of becoming another cog in a corporate machine made me physically uncomfortable. Around the same time, Linda hired Marcus Rodriguez as Chief Operating Officer. He came from one of those massive, soulless agencies downtown, brought in supposedly to help us scale efficiently and optimize operational workflows. Marcus was smooth, articulate, and immediately made it clear he thought our creative-first approach was charming but unsustainable for serious growth. He spoke in corporate buzzwords and seemed to view our client relationships as unnecessarily personal and difficult to systematize. I should have trusted my instincts about Marcus from our first creative team meeting. He listened to my presentation about our newest campaign for Stone Harbor, a summer family reunion concept that focused on multi-generational bonding, with this patronizing half-smile that made my skin crawl. When I finished, he said, "Interesting approach, Leah. Very heartwarming. But have we considered more quantifiable engagement metrics? How does this strategy translate to measurable ROI beyond these emotional anecdotes?" The way he said emotional anecdotes made it clear he thought my approach was amateur hour. But Linda backed me up, pointing out that our emotional anecdotes had generated more measurable success than any campaign the agency had ever run. Marcus nodded and smiled, but I caught him taking notes during the rest of the meeting, and something about his expression made me deeply uncomfortable. Looking back, that meeting should have been a massive red flag. But I was focused on the work, preparing for the biggest presentation of my career. Stone Harbor Resorts had been so thrilled with our summer campaign results that they wanted us to pitch a comprehensive rebranding strategy for their entire company. This wasn't just marketing individual properties. They wanted a complete reimagining of how Stone Harbor positioned itself in the luxury hospitality market. It was exactly the kind of project I'd been building toward my entire career. A chance to take everything I'd learned about authentic marketing, emotional connection, and luxury accessibility, and create a blueprint that could transform a family business into a nationally recognized brand without losing its soul. I had 6 weeks to develop the most important presentation of my professional life, and I threw myself into it with every ounce of creative energy I possessed. What I didn't know was that Marcus Rodriguez was documenting every brilliant idea I generated, systematically copying my strategies, and already planning to steal the career I'd spent 15 years building. The morning I discovered his betrayal would shatter my faith in workplace integrity and teach me that sometimes the biggest threat to your professional life comes from the people you're supposed to trust most. I remember that Tuesday morning in late September 2019 with vivid clarity because it started so perfectly. I'd arrived at the office early, around 6:30 a.m., carrying a steaming cup of coffee from the little cafe downstairs and feeling energized about finalizing my Stone Harbor presentation materials. The office was still dark, except for the early morning light filtering through our huge windows, and I loved those quiet moments before everyone arrived when I could organize my thoughts and tackle complex creative challenges without interruption. My desk was covered with mood boards, client research, and prototype marketing materials for what I privately called Project Homecoming, the comprehensive rebranding strategy that would position Stone Harbor as the premier destination for meaningful family experiences. I'd spent weeks developing a revolutionary approach that combined luxury amenities with authentic emotional connection, something no one in hospitality marketing had successfully achieved at scale. The core concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of marketing individual hotels, we'd market the experience of rediscovering what matters most when you step away from the chaos of modern life. Every touchpoint, from website design to in-room amenities, would reinforce the message that Stone Harbor properties weren't just places to stay, they were places to remember who you are when work emails and soccer schedules stop defining your identity. I'd developed detailed customer persona maps, emotional journey frameworks, and even prototyped a revolutionary booking experience that started with questions about what guests hope to feel during their stay rather than just dates and room preferences. The strategy included partnership opportunities with local artisans, community integration programs, and a loyalty system based on meaningful experiences rather than just nights booked. But the piece I was most excited about was a content strategy I called Stories Worth Living. Instead of traditional marketing materials, we'd create an ongoing narrative platform where past guests could share transformational moments from their stays, and potential guests could explore experiences through the lens of real human connection. It was unprecedented in the industry, part marketing campaign, part community building, part social impact initiative. Around 8:15 a.m., I needed to print some materials for a team review meeting, so I headed to the copy center down the hall. As I passed Marcus's office, I noticed his computer was still logged in from the previous evening, displaying what looked like a presentation deck. Normally, I wouldn't have paid attention, but something about the color scheme caught my eye. It was identical to the brand palette I'd developed for Stone Harbor. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. The slide title read Rodriguez Marketing Solutions, Revolutionary Hospitality Branding for the Modern Family. Below that was my exact customer persona framework, reformatted with Marcus's name in the byline. Not similar, identical. Every insight, every demographic detail, every behavioral pattern I'd spent weeks researching and developing. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through slide after slide of my stolen work. The emotional journey mapping I'd created for Stone Harbor was there, rebranded as the Rodriguez Method. My Stories Worth Living content strategy had been renamed Authentic Narrative Marketing and was being presented as Marcus's innovative approach to hospitality branding. Even my specific language was copied verbatim, phrases like luxury accessibility and emotional destination architecture that I'd coined during late-night brainstorming sessions. But the worst part was seeing my detailed competitive analysis, client research, and strategic recommendations laid out as the foundation for something called Rodriguez Marketing Solutions. Marcus wasn't just stealing my current project, he was stealing my entire professional methodology and preparing to launch his own agency with my work as his portfolio. I printed the entire presentation, 47 slides of my stolen intellectual property. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely operate the printer, and I felt like I might vomit in the hallway. 15 years of professional development, countless late nights, perfecting my approach, the creative breakthrough that was supposed to define my career. All of it stolen by someone I'd trusted as a colleague. Back at my desk, I stared at the printouts while trying to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't casual inspiration or coincidental thinking. This was systematic theft of proprietary work product. Marcus had clearly been documenting my strategies during meetings, copying my client files, and preparing to pass off my innovations as his own original thinking. The phone rang, and I answered automatically. It was Maria Stone, calling to confirm our presentation meeting scheduled for the following Friday. "Leah," she said, her voice warm with excitement. "I can't tell you how much our family is looking forward to your presentation. The preview materials you sent last week were exactly the direction we've been dreaming about. This feels like the partnership that's going to take Stone Harbor to the next level." I managed to respond professionally, but inside I was screaming. Maria Stone was expecting a revolutionary rebranding strategy that I'd poured my heart into creating, And meanwhile, my colleague was preparing to steal that exact work and use it to launch his competing business. The betrayal felt personal and professional simultaneously. He wasn't just stealing my ideas, he was stealing my relationships, my reputation, and my future. After hanging up with Maria, I sat in my chair for probably 20 minutes, staring at the evidence of Marcus's theft while trying to figure out my next move. I could confront him directly, but he'd obviously deny everything and probably destroy the evidence. I could go to Linda immediately, but I needed to be strategic about how I presented this situation. Most importantly, I needed to protect my client relationship and ensure the Stone Harbor project wasn't compromised by office drama. My first instinct was to document everything. I took photos of Marcus's computer screen, made copies of his stolen presentation, and started compiling a timeline of when I'd shared various pieces of information during team meetings. I also backed up all my original work files to a personal drive, just in case Marcus tried to sabotage my access to company systems. But even as I gathered evidence, a horrible realization was dawning. Marcus wasn't just planning to steal my current project. He was systematically studying my entire approach to hospitality marketing so he could replicate my success independently. This was a calculated, long-term theft of my professional identity, and I was probably not the first creative professional he'd done this to. The office started filling up with my team members around 9 a.m., and I had to pretend everything was normal while feeling like my entire career was under attack. Jake bounced over to my desk with his usual morning enthusiasm, excited to show me some design concepts he'd worked on the previous evening. Emma was reviewing copy drafts for a different client, occasionally asking for my input on tone and messaging. Everyone was depending on my leadership and expertise, completely unaware that our chief operating officer was planning to steal the intellectual property that made our team successful. Around 10:30 a.m., Marcus arrived at the office, looking polished and confident as always. He walked past my desk with a friendly "Good morning, Leah," like nothing had happened, but I noticed he immediately went to his computer and closed the presentation I'd discovered. The casual way he covered his tracks made it clear this wasn't his first time stealing someone's work. I spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on legitimate work while planning my conversation with Linda. I needed to present this situation professionally, with concrete evidence and a clear recommendation for how to proceed. But I also needed to be prepared for the possibility that Linda might not take my side. Marcus was her hire, brought in specifically to help the agency grow and scale. During lunch break, I requested a private meeting with Linda for the end of the day. When I told her it was urgent and involved a serious professional matter, she immediately cleared her calendar and asked if I needed HR support. I said I wasn't sure yet, but that I'd prefer to discuss the situation with her first, before involving anyone else. Those last few hours of what I thought was a normal workday felt surreal. I led a client strategy meeting, reviewed creative concepts with my team, and participated in casual office conversation, all while knowing that my professional future was hanging in the balance. Every time Marcus walked past or joined a conversation, I felt sick to my stomach thinking about his systematic betrayal. At 5:30 p.m., I knocked on Linda's office door with a folder full of evidence, and my heart pounding like I was about to jump out of an airplane. I had no idea that this conversation would be the beginning of a nightmare that would test everything I believed about professional integrity, workplace loyalty, and my own ability to fight for what was right. Linda's office had always felt like a safe space to me. The walls were covered with awards our campaigns had won, client photos from successful property launches, and inspirational quotes about creativity and authenticity. Her desk was organized chaos, color-coded client files, mock-up prints, and always a cup of green tea that somehow never seemed to get empty. This had been the room where I'd celebrated my biggest professional victories and worked through creative challenges with someone who truly understood my approach to marketing. But as I sat across from Linda that evening, everything felt different. She could tell from my expression that something serious was wrong, and her usual warm demeanor shifted into focused attention. "Leah," she said, leaning forward slightly, "what's going on? You look like you haven't slept." I took a deep breath and opened the folder containing printouts of Marcus's stolen presentation. "Linda, I discovered something today that I need to discuss with you immediately. It involves Marcus and the Stone Harbor project." I placed the first few slides in front of her, watching her expression change as she recognized my work with Marcus's name attached. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "Leah, help me understand what I'm looking at here. This looks like your Stone Harbor strategy materials, But she trailed off as the reality of the situation became clear. It's my complete Stone Harbor rebranding strategy, reformatted and rebranded as Marcus's original work. Every framework, every customer insight, every strategic recommendation, stolen directly from my files and presented as his innovative marketing methodology. I walked her through the evidence methodically, showing how my weeks of research and development had been systematically copied. Linda's face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like anger. But when she spoke, her voice was controlled and professional. Leah, these are serious allegations. How did you come across this presentation? I explained about seeing his computer screen that morning, emphasizing that I'd only looked because the familiar color scheme had caught my attention. Linda, this isn't just about one stolen project. He's copying my entire professional methodology to launch his own competing agency. Look at this. Rodriguez Marketing Solutions with my work as his portfolio. She studied the materials for several more minutes, taking notes and asking detailed questions about which elements I'd developed when. I could see her creative director brain analyzing the situation, and I felt hopeful that she was taking my concerns seriously. Linda had always been fiercely protective of our team's intellectual property and creative integrity. Leah, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need completely honest answers. Her tone was businesslike now, which I interpreted as her shifting into problem-solving mode. Have you shared these specific strategies with Marcus during team meetings or planning sessions? Of course I have, I said. He's been sitting in on all our strategic planning meetings since he started. But Linda, there's a difference between collaborative discussion and systematic theft of intellectual property. He's taken my proprietary methodologies and repackaged them as his own original innovations. She nodded thoughtfully. I understand your concern, but I need to be careful about how we handle this. Marcus was hired specifically to help us scale our operations and protect our intellectual assets. If there's been a misunderstanding about collaborative work versus individual contributions, we need to address it professionally. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. She was already framing this as a potential misunderstanding rather than deliberate theft. Linda, there's no misunderstanding here. My name is nowhere on his presentation. He's calling my frameworks, the Rodriguez method, and positioning himself as the innovative founder of approaches I spent years developing. I hear you, Leah, and I'm going to investigate this thoroughly. But I also need you to consider that in a collaborative environment, the line between individual and team contributions can sometimes become blurred. She was using her diplomatic voice now, the one she employed when managing difficult client relationships. I felt my first flash of real panic. Linda, are you suggesting that my proprietary marketing methodologies are somehow team property that Marcus has a right to use for his personal business ventures? I'm not suggesting anything yet, she said carefully. I'm saying that I need to have conversations with all parties involved before drawing any conclusions. This is a complex situation that requires careful handling. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes, but I left feeling worse than when I'd arrived. Linda promised to investigate, but her response felt more focused on protecting the agency from potential legal complications than protecting me from intellectual property theft. She asked me not to discuss the situation with other team members while she gathered more information, which felt like being silenced rather than supported. Walking home that evening, I realized that my faith in workplace loyalty might have been naive. Linda wasn't just my mentor anymore. She was also Marcus's boss, and he'd been hired specifically to help grow the business in ways that my creative focus hadn't addressed. If protecting Marcus meant sacrificing me, which choice would be better for the company's bottom line? That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation with Linda, analyzing every word and tone for clues about how she was really processing the situation. The woman who had taught me everything about authentic marketing was now speaking to me in careful corporate language that felt designed to minimize rather than address my concerns. The next morning, I arrived at the office early again, hoping to catch Marcus before the rest of the team arrived. I found him in the Kit Johnson area, making coffee and looking completely relaxed. When he saw me, he smiled and offered to make me a cup too, acting like we were still friendly colleagues. Marcus, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need to talk to you about something important, privately. His expression shifted slightly, still friendly, but with a hint of wariness. Of course, Leah, my office? We walked to his office, and I closed the door behind us. The same computer where I discovered his theft sat innocently on his desk, now displaying a generic screensaver. Marcus, I know about your Rodriguez Marketing Solutions presentation. I know you've stolen my Stone Harbor strategy and are presenting it as your own original work. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something calculating and cold in his expression. But then he recovered, putting on a confused and slightly hurt demeanor. Leah, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I've been working on some preliminary business development ideas, but I certainly haven't stolen anything from you or the company. I saw the presentation on your computer yesterday morning. 47 slides of my proprietary methodologies with your name as the creator. My customer persona frameworks, my emotional journey mapping, even my specific language and terminology, all rebranded as the Rodriguez method. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression that made me feel like I was a problem to be managed rather than a colleague to be respected. Leah, I think you might be misunderstanding the nature of collaborative work in an agency environment. The strategies we discuss in team meetings become part of our collective knowledge base. It's not unusual for team members to build on shared concepts when developing new business opportunities. The gaslighting was immediate and smooth, delivered with the kind of corporate confidence that makes you question your own perceptions. Marcus, we both know this wasn't collaborative building. You systematically copied my individual work product and are using it to launch a competing business. I understand you're feeling protective of your contributions, he said, his tone becoming slightly patronizing. But I think you might benefit from considering a broader perspective on intellectual property in team environments. Perhaps we could discuss some professional development opportunities that might help you understand how agencies typically handle these situations. I stared at him, realizing that he was not only refusing to acknowledge the theft, but was actually implying that my understanding of professional boundaries was somehow deficient. This wasn't just theft, it was manipulation designed to make me doubt my own professional judgment. Marcus, I've been working in this industry for 15 years. I understand the difference between collaborative development and intellectual property theft. What you've done is theft, and I've documented everything. His demeanor changed again, becoming cooler and more calculating. Leah, I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't substantiate. In situations like this, it's often difficult to prove individual ownership of concepts that developed through team collaboration. You might find that pursuing this matter could have unintended consequences for your professional reputation. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. And he was essentially telling me that if I continued to pursue this matter, he would frame it as a case of me being unable to distinguish between individual and team contributions, making me look paranoid and unprofessional. I left his office feeling like I'd just been professionally mugged. Marcus hadn't just stolen my work, he'd threatened my reputation, and implied that pursuing justice would only damage my career further. This was sophisticated workplace manipulation by someone who had clearly done this before. The rest of that day was torture. I had to sit through meetings with Marcus present, watching him participate in discussions about strategies he'd stolen from me, acting like a valued colleague while planning to destroy my career. During lunch, I called a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property theft, but she explained that proving ownership of marketing concepts developed in a corporate environment would be extremely difficult and expensive. By the end of the week, Linda scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss her investigation into my allegations. I walked into her office, hoping for justice and vindication, but knowing that I was probably about to discover just how alone I really was in this fight. Linda's expression was serious but unreadable when I sat down for our follow-up meeting. She had a manila folder on her desk, and I could see that she'd prepared for this conversation carefully. The warm, mentoring energy that had always defined our relationship felt distant, replaced by something more formal and cautious. Leah, I've spent the week investigating your concerns about Marcus and the Stone Harbor materials, she began, consulting her notes. I've reviewed the presentation you showed me, spoken with Marcus extensively, and consulted with our legal counsel about intellectual property policies in collaborative environments. My heart sank immediately. The fact that she'd involved legal counsel suggested this conversation was about protecting the company rather than protecting me. What did you find? I asked, though I was already bracing myself for disappointment. The situation is more complex than it initially appeared, Linda said carefully. Marcus has provided documentation showing that many of the concepts in question were developed through team brainstorming sessions where multiple people contributed ideas. He's also pointed out that some of the frameworks you're claiming as exclusively yours were built on foundational methodologies that are common throughout the hospitality marketing industry. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Linda, that's absolutely not true. The emotional journey mapping, the customer persona development, the stories worth living content strategy, those are my original innovations developed through months of independent research. Marcus has presented a different perspective, she continued, her voice taking on what I was beginning to recognize as HR speak. He suggests that your recollection of individual versus collaborative contributions may be influenced by your understandable pride in the work. He's also expressed concern that your reaction to his business development activities might be motivated by competitive anxiety rather than legitimate intellectual property concerns. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Marcus stolen my work, but he'd convinced Linda that I was either lying or delusional about my own contributions. Linda, are you seriously telling me that you believe Marcus's version of events over mine? After 15 years of working together, I'm telling you that I have two conflicting accounts of how certain marketing concepts were developed, and I need to make decisions based on documentable facts rather than competing memories. Her tone was becoming more corporate by the minute, and I realized I was no longer talking to my mentor. I was talking to a business owner protecting her company from potential legal liability. What documentable facts? I demanded. I can show you the original files on my computer, the timestamps proving when I created each framework, the email threads where I first presented these concepts to clients. Linda consulted her notes again. Marcus has raised some important points about those materials. Computer timestamps can be misleading when files are modified or reorganized. Email presentations often reflect collaborative work that was discussed and refined in meetings before being formally written. And client presentations frequently combine individual contributions with team input in ways that make individual attribution difficult. I stared at her, realizing that Marcus had spent the week not just denying my allegations, but building a comprehensive counter-narrative that positioned me as an unreliable narrator of my own professional contributions. Linda, I cannot believe you're entertaining this gaslighting. You know my work. You've watched me develop these concepts from scratch. Leah, I need you to lower your voice and approach this professionally, she said, which was code for stop making this difficult for me. I'm not questioning your talent or your contributions to this agency, but I am questioning whether your current emotional state is allowing you to assess this situation objectively. Now she was implying that I was too emotional to think clearly about my own intellectual property. The systematic way my concerns were being dismissed felt like professional assassination. What is your official position on this matter? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. My position is that this appears to be a misunderstanding about collaborative versus individual work product, possibly exacerbated by the stress of our upcoming presentation deadline. Linda opened the manila folder and pulled out what looked like a prepared statement. I'm recommending that you take a few days off to gain some perspective on the situation. When you return, I'd like you to focus on completing the Stone Harbor presentation without any further discussion of intellectual property ownership. I felt like the room was spinning. Not only was she refusing to address the theft, but she was essentially ordering me to drop the matter and continue working as if nothing had happened. And what about Marcus's competing agency? What about the fact that he's planning to use my stolen work to start a business that will directly compete with us? Marcus has assured me that any future business ventures will not compete directly with Meridian Creative and will not involve proprietary information developed here. She delivered this statement like she actually believed it, or wanted me to believe she believed it. Linda, how can you possibly think that's adequate protection for the agency or for my work? I was struggling to maintain professional composure while feeling like my entire career was being systematically destroyed. Leah, I think you need to consider whether your current attitude is in the best interest of your professional future at this agency, she said quietly. Sometimes workplace conflicts require people to choose between being right and being successful. I'm advising you to choose success. That was the moment I realized Linda wasn't just failing to protect me. She was actively choosing Marcus over me because he represented growth and business development, while I represented a creative employee who was causing problems. The mentor who had taught me about authentic marketing was now asking me to participate in covering up the theft of my authentic work. I left that meeting understanding that I was completely on my own. My boss had chosen my intellectual property thief over me, and my options were to accept the theft silently or fight a battle that would probably destroy my career regardless of whether I won. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at 15 years of professional development materials, wondering if everything I'd built could really be stolen so easily. But as I reviewed my original work files, client testimonials, and industry recognition, I realized that Marcus and Linda had made a crucial miscalculation. They assumed I would choose the path of least resistance, accepting the theft in order to preserve my job security. They didn't understand that my professional integrity was worth more to me than my comfort, and that I was prepared to fight for everything I'd worked to build. The next morning, I didn't take the days off Linda had recommended. Instead, I arrived at the office early and began documenting everything in preparation for the war I was about to declare on my own workplace. The Monday morning after my devastating meeting with Linda, I walked into the office with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. If my employer was going to protect my intellectual property thief rather than me, then I needed to protect myself through every legal and professional avenue available. I'd spent the weekend researching my options, consulting with employment attorneys, and developing a strategy to expose Marcus's theft while safeguarding my client relationships. My first priority was securing evidence before Marcus or Linda could destroy or manipulate anything. I arrived at 6 a.m. and systematically backed up all my original work files, email correspondence, and client communications to multiple external drives. Every timestamp, every revision history, every piece of documentation that proved my ownership of the stolen marketing concepts needed to be preserved in multiple locations where the company couldn't access or alter it. I also started quietly reaching out to former colleagues who had witnessed my development of the methodologies Marcus was now claiming as his own. Emma, who had been present during many of my creative breakthrough sessions, was shocked when I described what was happening. "Leah, that's insane," she whispered during our coffee break conversation. "I literally watched you invent the stories worth living framework during that late-night session in March. You were drawing diagrams on the whiteboard for 3 hours." Jake was equally disturbed when I showed him printouts of Marcus's stolen presentation materials. "This is your exact customer persona mapping structure," he said, pointing to slides that featured my research methodologies with Marcus's name attached. "I helped you organize the demographic data for these profiles. How is he claiming he developed this?" But when I asked if they would be willing to provide written statements documenting their observations, both Emma and Jake became visibly uncomfortable. "Leah, I want to support you, but I can't afford to lose this job," Emma said apologetically. "If Linda is backing Marcus, then speaking up might get me fired too." I understood their position, but it was another reminder of how isolated workplace theft can make you. The people who witnessed my work being stolen were too economically vulnerable to speak truth to power, leaving me to fight this battle without the collaborative support I'd always valued in our team environment. By Wednesday, Marcus seemed to sense that I wasn't backing down as quietly as he'd hoped. During our weekly team meeting, he made several pointed comments about team players who understand that agency success requires putting collective goals ahead of individual ego. When I presented updates on the Stone Harbor project, he interrupted repeatedly to suggest optimizations that were clearly designed to establish his input in the final presentation materials. The most infuriating moment came when he said, "Leah, I think your emotional attachment to this project might be preventing you from seeing opportunities for collaborative improvement. Sometimes we need to let go of personal ownership and embrace team success." He delivered this manipulation while looking directly at me, making sure everyone in the room understood that my commitment to intellectual property ownership was somehow unprofessional. After the meeting, I requested another private conversation with Linda. This time, I was prepared with legal documentation and a clear ultimatum. "Linda, I've consulted with employment attorneys about intellectual property theft, and I want to give you one final opportunity to address this situation before I pursue external remedies." Her expression hardened immediately. "Leah, I thought we agreed that you would drop this matter and focus on your actual job responsibilities." "We didn't agree to anything," I replied firmly. "You instructed me to accept theft and move on. I'm informing you that I will not do that, and I'm giving you the opportunity to handle this internally before it becomes a legal and public relations issue for the agency." Linda was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an expression I'd never seen before. When she spoke, her voice was cold and controlled. "Leah, I need to be very clear about something. Marcus Rodriguez is a valuable strategic hire who brings operational expertise this agency needs to grow. You are a talented creative director, but you are not irreplaceable. If you choose to pursue this matter further, you need to understand that it will probably result in your termination." The threat was explicit now. She was essentially telling me that fighting for my intellectual property would cost me my job, while accepting the theft would allow me to keep working for people who had betrayed me. Linda, are you really threatening to fire me for refusing to let someone steal my work? I'm explaining the reality of your situation, she said. You can choose to be a team player and continue building your career here, or you can choose to be a disruptive influence who damages agency relationships and operational efficiency. But you cannot choose both. That afternoon, I made the decision that would define the next chapter of my professional life. I called Maria Stone directly and requested an emergency meeting to discuss important developments affecting our upcoming presentation. I couldn't allow my stolen work to be presented to my most important client without her understanding what was really happening. Maria agreed to meet me the next morning at her corporate office in Milwaukee. As I drove up Highway 94 toward what might be the most important conversation of my career, I realized that I was about to find out whether 15 years of authentic relationship building with clients would count for anything when my own agency was working against me. Maria Stone's office reflected the same authentic, family-focused values that had made her properties so successful. Instead of the sterile corporate environment I'd expected, her space featured comfortable seating areas with photos of guests experiencing memorable moments at Stone Harbor properties, handwritten thank you notes from families, and awards that emphasized customer satisfaction over profit margins. Leah, she said warmly as I arrived, I have to admit I'm curious about this urgent meeting. Your tone yesterday sounded serious. I took a deep breath and launched into the most difficult professional conversation of my career. Maria, I need to tell you about a situation that directly affects our upcoming presentation and your company's future marketing strategy. I explained the intellectual property theft systematically, showing her side-by-side comparisons of my original work and Marcus's stolen presentation materials. Her expression grew increasingly serious as I walked through the evidence. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said slowly. The person who stole your marketing concepts is employed by the same agency that's presenting our rebranding strategy, and your boss is protecting him rather than addressing the theft. That's exactly right, I confirmed. And Maria, I need you to understand that the presentation Linda and I are scheduled to deliver on Friday contains my authentic work, but there's a possibility that Marcus will try to claim credit for the innovations during or after the presentation. Maria was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the documentation I'd provided. Finally, she looked up with an expression of barely controlled anger. Leah, this is completely unacceptable. Stone Harbor Resorts has built our entire business on authentic family values and ethical treatment of our employees and partners. We cannot and will not work with an agency that tolerates intellectual property theft. I felt a surge of relief and validation. After weeks of being gaslighted and threatened, someone with power was finally taking my situation seriously. Maria, I want to complete the Stone Harbor project because I believe in your company and I'm proud of the strategy I've developed. But I needed you to understand the context before moving forward. Here's what's going to happen, Maria said decisively. I'm canceling Friday's presentation with Meridian Creative. Instead, I want you to present your rebranding strategy directly to our board of directors as an independent consultant. If your work is as innovative as I believe it is, I want Stone Harbor to have an exclusive relationship with you personally, not with an agency that steals from its own employees. The conversation continued for 2 more hours as we discussed the logistics of transitioning our relationship from agency-based to direct consulting. Maria's business attorney joined us by phone to discuss contract structures that would protect my intellectual property while giving Stone Harbor the exclusive marketing partnership they wanted. By the time I drove back to Chicago that afternoon, my professional future looked completely different than it had that morning. I was going to lose my job at Meridian Creative, but I was gaining something more valuable, a major client relationship based on authentic respect for my work, and a chance to build my own consulting practice on my own terms. But first, I had to survive the confrontation that would happen when Linda discovered what I'd done. Linda's reaction to my meeting with Maria Stone was explosive in the quietly corporate way that makes workplace retaliation feel professional, even when it's pure vindictiveness. She called me into her office Friday morning, 30 minutes before our canceled presentation was supposed to begin, with Marcus present and a woman from HR I'd never met before taking notes. Leah, Linda began, her voice tight with controlled anger. Maria Stone called yesterday to inform us that she's terminating our contract and pursuing a direct consulting relationship with you personally. She also mentioned that you shared confidential agency materials with her to support allegations of internal intellectual property disputes. The presence of HR made it clear this was a formal disciplinary meeting, not a discussion. I had been prepared for this moment since my conversation with Maria, and I'd spent the previous evening reviewing my employment contract and consulting with my attorney about how to handle what was coming. Linda, I informed our client about a situation that directly affected the integrity of work being performed on her account. I replied carefully. Maria Stone deserved to know that the marketing strategies she was paying for had been stolen by a company employee for use in a competing business. Marcus leaned forward with that same patronizing expression he'd perfected over the past weeks. Leah, I think you're mischaracterizing collaborative work development as theft, and now you've damaged an important client relationship based on your misperceptions. The HR representative looked up from her notes. Miss Johnson, did you share proprietary agency materials with a client without authorization from management? It was a trap question designed to make anything I'd done sound like a violation of company policy. I shared documentation of intellectual property theft that directly affected work being performed for that client. The client had a right to understand that her marketing strategy had been compromised. That's not your determination to make, Linda said sharply. You violated confidentiality protocols and damaged a business relationship based on unsubstantiated allegations that we've already investigated and found to be without merit. The gaslighting was systematic and coordinated now. They were reframing my evidence-based exposure of theft as emotional overreaction and policy violation. Linda, the allegations were substantiated with documented evidence that you chose to ignore because protecting Marcus was more important than protecting my intellectual property. Johnson, the HR representative, interrupted. Your behavior over the past 2 weeks has created a hostile work environment and interfered with normal business operations. We're placing you on immediate administrative leave while we determine appropriate disciplinary action. Administrative leave was corporate speak for we're firing you, but we need time to make sure we won't get sued. I had expected this outcome, but hearing it officially still felt like a punch to the gut. 15 years of loyal service, countless successful campaigns, and authentic client relationships were being terminated because I refused to let someone steal my work. Before you make any final decisions, I said calmly, I want to ensure that everyone in this room understands the legal implications of retaliating against an employee for reporting intellectual property theft. I pulled out a folder containing documentation my attorney had prepared. I've consulted with employment law attorneys who specialize in workplace retaliation, and this situation falls clearly under whistleblower protection statutes. The room got very quiet. Marcus's confident expression faltered slightly, and the HR representative stopped taking notes to look at Linda for guidance. This was the moment I'd been building toward, letting them know that firing me would have legal consequences they weren't prepared to handle. Miss Johnson, the HR representative said carefully, are you threatening legal action against the company? I'm informing you that I've documented a pattern of intellectual property theft and subsequent retaliation, and that I'm prepared to pursue all available legal remedies if this situation isn't resolved appropriately. My attorney had coached me on this language, factual, professional, and legally protective. Linda's expression had shifted from anger to something that looked like calculation. She was realizing that firing me immediately might create bigger problems than keeping me employed while they figured out how to minimize their legal exposure. Leah, she said finally, I think we all need to step back and consider how to resolve this situation professionally. Perhaps we can discuss a transition plan that serves everyone's interests. Translation, they wanted to negotiate my departure in a way that prevented me from suing them. I'm willing to discuss a transition plan, I replied, but any agreement needs to include public acknowledgement that Marcus Rodriguez plagiarized my work and assurance that he will not use my intellectual property in any future business ventures. Marcus finally spoke up, and his mask of professional composure was completely gone. Leah, you're being completely unreasonable. You're trying to destroy my career over collaborative work that you're misremembering as individual contributions. I'm trying to protect my career from someone who stole 15 years of professional development and is now trying to gaslight me into accepting it, I replied firmly. And I'm no longer willing to pretend that this is a misunderstanding rather than deliberate theft. The meeting ended with no resolution except agreement to continue discussions through attorneys. As I packed my personal belongings that afternoon, my team members watched nervously, clearly understanding that my departure meant their job security was also uncertain. Emma whispered that she was sorry things had worked out this way, but that she hoped I understood why she couldn't have spoken up publicly. I did understand, which made the whole situation even sadder. Marcus hadn't just stolen from me, he'd created an environment where talented, ethical people were too scared to speak truth to power, because their economic survival depended on staying silent. But as I carried my box of personal items out of the office I'd considered home for nearly 6 years, I felt something unexpected alongside the anger and betrayal: relief. I was finally free from an environment that had revealed itself to be fundamentally corrupt, and I was about to find out whether my authentic approach to client relationships was strong enough to build a successful independent practice. The negotiations between my attorney and Meridian Creative lasted 3 weeks and resulted in a settlement that felt like partial justice. The company agreed to pay me 6 months severance, provide a neutral reference letter, and include a clause acknowledging that certain marketing methodologies developed by Miss Johnson remain her intellectual property for future professional use. It wasn't the public vindication I wanted, but it was legal protection that would prevent Marcus from using my work in his planned competing business. More importantly, it freed me to move forward with the Stone Harbor consulting contract and begin building my own marketing practice. Maria Stone had been incredibly supportive throughout the transition, connecting me with other family-owned hospitality companies who were looking for authentic marketing approaches rather than corporate manipulation. By December 2019, I had launched Johnson Marketing Solutions with 3 major clients and a waiting list of properties that wanted to work with someone who understood that hospitality marketing should feel like genuine invitation rather than aggressive sales pressure. My stolen work had been protected, my professional reputation had been vindicated, and I was building something that belonged entirely to me. But the real victory came 6 months later when I learned that Marcus Rodriguez had been terminated from Meridian Creative after another creative employee came forward with evidence that he'd stolen their work too. It turned out I wasn't his first victim, just the first one brave enough to fight back publicly. Linda eventually called to apologize and ask if I'd consider returning to the agency, but by then I was building something better than anything I could have achieved as someone else's employee. The Stone Harbor rebranding campaign launched in March 2020, just as the hospitality industry was facing unprecedented challenges due to the pandemic. But because our strategy was built on authentic family connection rather than superficial luxury marketing, Stone Harbor properties became destinations for families who needed genuine bonding experiences during an incredibly difficult time. Despite industry-wide struggles, their bookings actually increased during 2020, and the campaign won 2 national awards for innovative crisis marketing. Today, Johnson Marketing Solutions specializes in helping family-owned hospitality businesses compete with corporate chains by emphasizing the authentic relationships and genuine experiences that make independent properties special. My team of 6 includes 3 former Meridian Creative employees who left to join me after witnessing how I'd been treated, and we've developed a company culture based on the authentic values that were missing from my corporate experience. The work is challenging in different ways now, managing client relationships directly, handling business development personally, taking financial risks that employee status never required. But every day I wake up knowing that my success belongs to me, that my innovations won't be stolen, and that my professional integrity doesn't depend on anyone else's willingness to protect it. The most rewarding aspect of my independent practice has been mentoring other marketing professionals who've experienced workplace theft or retaliation. The hospitality industry is small enough that my story became well known, and I regularly hear from people facing similar situations with stolen work or toxic management. I've learned that workplace intellectual property theft is far more common than most people realize, and that fighting back successfully requires strategic planning, legal protection, and the courage to prioritize long-term integrity over short-term security. Looking back on those terrible months in 2019, I realized that Marcus Rodriguez and Linda Vasquez actually did me a favor by revealing their true priorities before I wasted more years building value for people who didn't respect my contributions. The betrayal was painful, but it forced me to bet on myself in ways I might never have attempted if I'd remained comfortable in someone else's organization. The hardest lesson was learning that workplace loyalty often flows in only one direction. Employees are expected to be loyal to companies that will sacrifice them without hesitation when business interests conflict with ethical responsibilities. But the most valuable lesson was discovering that professional authenticity isn't just a marketing strategy, it's a career foundation strong enough to build an entire business on. Every morning when I review my client list, check in with my team, and plan campaigns that help family businesses thrive through authentic marketing, I'm reminded that sometimes the worst professional betrayal can become the catalyst for the best professional decision you've ever made. Marcus stole my work, but he inadvertently gave me the motivation to claim my entire career on my own terms. I still drive past the Meridian Creative office sometimes, in that beautiful River North building with the exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, where I thought I was building my permanent professional home. But I don't feel nostalgia or regret when I see it. I feel gratitude for everything that experience taught me about workplace integrity, personal resilience, and the courage required to fight for what you've earned. The hospitality marketing industry is better when authentic professionals are empowered to do their best work without fear of theft or retaliation. Every family business that chooses genuine connection over corporate manipulation, every marketing professional who stands up to intellectual property theft, every workplace culture that prioritizes integrity over profit, these are the victories that matter more than individual career success. If you're watching this because you've experienced workplace betrayal, intellectual property theft, or retaliation for speaking truth to power, I want you to know that fighting back is possible, that authentic work has lasting value, and that sometimes losing a job is the first step toward finding your real professional calling. The people who steal your work can never steal your ability to create new innovations, and the managers who betray your trust can never diminish the authentic relationships you've built with people who respect your integrity. Your career belongs to you. Your innovations belong to you. Your professional reputation belongs to you. Don't let anyone steal those things without a fight, but also don't let the fight consume your ability to keep creating value in the world. Sometimes the best revenge against workplace theft is building something so successful that everyone can see exactly what the thieves lost when they chose corruption over collaboration. Document everything. Trust your instincts, seek legal protection when necessary, and never apologize for refusing to accept theft. But most importantly, remember that your authentic professional voice is powerful enough to build whatever career you're brave enough to pursue. Marcus Rodriguez taught me that the hard way, and I'm grateful for the lesson even though I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone. The hospitality industry needs marketing professionals who understand that authentic experiences create lasting value, that family businesses deserve strategies as sophisticated as corporate campaigns, and that the best marketing feels like genuine invitation rather than manipulative pressure. If that describes your approach to the work, then there's a place for you in this industry, whether you're fighting to reclaim stolen innovations or starting fresh with your own authentic vision. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if this story resonated with your own workplace experiences. Next week, I'll be sharing strategies for protecting your intellectual property in collaborative environments, and the week after that, I'll interview 3 other marketing professionals who've successfully fought back against workplace theft. These conversations matter because workplace integrity affects all of us, and the more we share our experiences, the harder it becomes for people like Marcus Rodriguez to exploit and manipulate the talented professionals who make this industry successful. Your work matters, your innovations matter, and your professional integrity matters more than any job that requires you to compromise it. Remember that the next time someone tries to convince you that accepting theft is the price of career success, it's not. Authentic success belongs to people with the courage to fight for it, and that includes you.